more late night philosophy. And if you're wondering why I'm out of breath, it's because I just did a bunch of push ups. All right. Just cleaning off my camera a little bit. But yeah, just worked out. Reason being, not to show off, was basically just to wake up because I'm tired. I literally just drank some iced coffee half an hour ago. Still tired. Um, some people's systems break down coffee differently than others. Like some people can't drink coffee after 5 p.m. I can and can still go to sleep. So at least, although I'm out of breath, I'm awake. So that's good. Because if not, wouldn't have made it, folks. Wouldn't have made it. Oh boy. So we're gonna do some more late night philosophy, and we're gonna touch on a different subject, one that I haven't touched on that much before. Pause. But I've talked about free will and determinism unrelatedly in other live streams when I was conversing about philosophy with the chat room, but I haven't done one specifically just on free will versus determinism just because it gets so messy. But um, we're going to go there today. We're going to talk about determinism versus free will, which is better and why. Bear in mind, there are arguments for both, literally going back to ancient philosophy. And there's probably in the literature, like if you go, you know, to like the journal, the American Philosophical Association journal, or you look up one of those other academic um, websites where you can get listings of all the different um, published articles, or if you just go to the Stanford Encyclopedia online, there's a bunch of stuff. What's up, Cat? Um, but um, we can go into a little bit. Like you notice when, for the folks who've been here before, like my moderator Cat and what's up Moonlit, for people who've rocked with me before, they know that even when I talk about philosophy, I never delve into too much jargon, and I don't think that's very appreciated as it should be, because if people had actually like studied like formal philosophy, they would realize how much jargon is involved and how much I kind of dumb things down so that people can understand what's going on. Sana Khan says hi. What's up? Mikey says what's good. Um, so yeah, guys, this is my little late night bull sessions. This is the third one in a row where I'm talking specifically philosophy. I might do some other ones, but this is like my late night. I call it late night philosophy because, well, it's literally late night where I am, and talking philosophy. Uh, Catherine says, like, share, subscribe, buy a coffee, or drop a super chat to Contrarian. Thank you. Like I said, I literally just drank coffee like half an hour ago and I'm still tired. So I'm out of breath right now because I just did a bunch of push ups so I could wake up. I was just speaking to my mods literally like a few minutes ago before I went live. I told them I need to do this before I get too tired to do so. So right before I went live, I did like fifth, hmm, I'm gonna say 57 good push-ups. I don't know how many I actually did, but I did 57 good ones. Pause. So Mikey said I subbed and turned on notifications game. Thank you, brother. Appreciate that, man. So, like Mona said, the late today's late night philosophy is about determinism versus free will. And if people, I know a lot of people don't know what those are, or if they have heard about them, they may not understand exactly what they are. So I'm going to explain them well as much as I can. I mean, because even in philosophical circles, there's still wide disagreement amongst all these different things. So determinism is generally the view that nature, that there's a lawfulness of nature, um, that basically nature is governed by scientific laws, and that's it. Okay. Uh, Free will, generally speaking, again, there's no agreement on exactly what free will is, which is one of the reasons people find it dubious. But in any case, free will is generally the view that people, sometimes animals, but generally humans, have some sort of agency to make decisions and judgments that is independent of um, any sort of like laws to human behavior. So so that's generally the difference between determinism versus free will. And like I said, you can literally go back to the writings of Plato and see this stuff being hashed out. Catherine says, I'm determined to have free will. Haha. So I'm gonna get into all the nuances because you can be a little bit of both. I just don't agree with them. This is where it gets complicated. Is all of the different flavors of determinism, all the different flavors of free will. Okay, because there's something called. Well, let me read the let me look what this they're saying in the chat room first. Boyish writer says, "Hey, can I tell you something?" No, because I already know you're gonna say something stupid. And as soon as you do, one of my moderators is gonna kick you out the stream. Christian says Doritos or Cheetos. Eh, tacos. Well, I may have been wrong. Thank you, boyish writer too. Um, all right. So he said tacos. W. Let's go. Right. Thanks. Yeah. I mean, I'm not a. Okay, let me not lie. I was about to say I'm not a chips person. I am a chips person, but I'm more potato chips. Well, sour cream and onion potato chips. If it's Doritos, it gotta be like what's the blue bag called? The not the salsa verde, not the jumping jack flash, the the cool I forgot cool something, those cool ranch. Thank you, Moonlit. Those are the only ones I really like, or the original ones, the old school original ones. I didn't know Doritos went all the way back to the '60s, but Doritos go back to the '60s. The originals, those are probably the best. I've had those, and I miss the old bags from the '80s as well. They've already they started doing the retro bags, guys. I'm sure you guys seen them in the grocery stores or wherever, where you can get the retro Doritos bags, Doritos tacos. I've seen those. I think I had that, but there is a taco flavor, something like that. This like the old school ones, but it's not Taco Bell. Anyway, getting back to the subject. So again, just to rehash, so we're talking about determinism versus free will. This is late night philosophy with your boy Just A Contrarian. This is part 3. yesterday was part two, which was uh shit, what was that about? Oh, I tried to give like a defense of moral realism. That was yesterday. If you guys want to check that out, Late Night Philosophy Part Two. Then the first one, which is called Late Night Philosophy Bull Session, and it ended up not. We ended up not talking that much about philosophy. So I'm gonna try to stay on point today, like I did yesterday. Um, my little fidget spinner here, but like I said, determinism is generally the view that nature is governed by scientific laws, and that determines everything, including human behavior. Free will, on the other hand, is the view, well, is the concept that of people having some sort of free, some sort of like agency that's not determined by the laws of human nature. He said, "Okay, good night. Got school. I sub. Okay, thank you. Have a good night. So, someone please." um, so, any case, so there are varieties upon varieties upon varieties of free will and determinism. So, in between that, you have what's called compatibilism. And there's different varieties of compatibilism. Compatibilism basically says that you can have both determinism and free will. And you have incompatibilism, which says that you either believe in determinism or you believe in free will. People who believe in free will are called libertarians, not to be confused with political libertarians. Believers of free will are called metaphysical libertarians, not political libertarians. Okay, so people who believe in free will are called libertarians. People believe and then you have determinists. But you also have compatibilists who believe that you can be an advocate of both determinism and free will. Whereas you have incompatibilists who believe that you're either libertarian or determinist, and they don't they don't mesh, they don't they don't mingle together. So a person who is a compatibilist but also believes in determinism would be called a soft determinist. I'm about to talk about my Melissa. So your thoughts on compatibilists. So I'm about to get into that. So I just want to like give all the terms first because there's so many, and even still, I'm not gonna give all the terms. I'm just giving the most generic ones. So a person who believes in free will, but is also determinist, will possibly are usually called soft determinists, whereas an incompatibilist about who believes in determinism would be called a hard determinist. Pause. um, and then there are libertarians who are also compatibilists, where they basically say, okay, well, yes, nature is governed by scientific laws, except for human agency or human freedom. Okay. Whereas there's also libertarian incompatibilists who say, well, no, there is no determinism. Nature, nature, either they believe that nature isn't governed by scientific laws, or they just believe it's completely irrelevant to human nature. Probably they were probably also argue there isn't a human nature, but whatever. Um, so my views on compatibilism. So my at one point I thought compatibilism was the more reasonable stance, but as I got to understand scientific psychology better, I just don't see a role for it because in scientific psychology, we pretty much say that all of human behavior is governed by scientific laws, so that leaves no role for free will. free will is an illusion once you look at once you look at behavioral neuroscience and cognitive neuroscience, like you see there's no role for free will with in in a scientific explanation of human behavior, which would mean people who take that route would be incompatibilists and determinists. um, Catherine says good night to Boyish Rider too. Blackbeard says, "Man, I ain't ever seen you streaming so late." Nah, I've been on even later than this, bro. Like, I literally the other night I was on at 12:30. I started at 12:30, didn't end at 12:30. I started at 12:30. I've been on late before, but I just try not to. But that's why I call this late night philosophy. But in any case, um, so I I don't I here's the thing. I don't like most of these terms. I don't like because they're very they're very dogmatic, and at the end of the day, I care more about what is the what is the science behind human behavior. But for the most part, most scientists are determinists. For the most part, some are libertarians, but especially when it comes to behavioral science, most of us are determinists. But there, even amongst hard determinists, you can divide this even more. There's there's complete determinists and there's incomplete. In, sorry, there's complete determinists and there's a type. And there's like incomplete determinism or probable determinism. I'm of the latter. I'm a probable determinism. This is why. So back during the height of the European Enlightenment and Age of Reason, there was a physicist who looking at, or mathematician, whatever he was, Simon Laplace. I don't know how you say it in French. I think it's Laplace, but um, we were in the height of the Enlightenment, and he thought, well, pretty much science has shown that all of nature is deterministic. We don't need to speculate through religion or philosophy or anything like that. He was saying he thought Newtonian mechanics basically gave us the keys to the palace, so to speak, on understanding nature. And he under his in his reasoning, given what we knew at the time about Newtonian mechanics, and expounding that that would probably grow over time, which it did, but what he didn't encounter is they actually opened up more questions than it solved. But anyway, looking at the state of classical mechanics at the time, he thought that it leaves no role for speculation or some sort of human freedom or agency left outside of science. I get his motivations, but he was wrong because then comes along something outside of classical mechanics, quantum theory, which shows that everything that at the fundamental level of reality, everything is chancy and indeterministic. Ironically, ironically though, although quantum theory shows that at the fundamental level of nature, everything is chancy and indeterministic, ergo probabilistic, it gives rise itself to a deterministic theory of everything, or at least on the quantum level. Then on the macro level, we have general relativity. But anyway, not going into all of the physics about that, but given that now we find out that at the most fundamental levels of reality, and then almost every level of scientific explanation, we still have to deal with probabilistic theory. A lot of us came to believe, well, yes, everything is deterministic, but it's a probabilistic determinism, not a complete determinism. And so that's where I am myself. I believe every I believe that nature is deterministic. That is to say that that there is a lawfulness of nature. Every the nature is governed by scientific laws. However, I think that it is still probabilistic. Like knowing even if you knew every fact datum there is about everything there is or ever will be or ever has been, it won't in Laplace's reasoning let us know with mathematical certainty what will happen or what has happened. It will always be chancy. Mullen says what about human nature? Does that factor in? That's what I'm talking about. So that's what I'm talking about, human nature. So a determinist is usually someone who's going to accept that there is human nature, whereas a libertarian or believer in free will may or may not. Like I said, if the libertarian is a compatibilist, he will probably accept that most of nature is lawful, but then deny that human nature is. Um, or may say that human nature is governed by scientific laws, but that our agency isn't. Others have gone the route of saying, well, if there's a certain randomness to nature, that's what gives us free will. But that doesn't help because if you think about it, get randomness doesn't give you choices. I mean, it doesn't give you free choice. Randomness is just uh, whereas determinism, you can. So I'm getting ahead of myself, but with determinism, presumably there's no choices once you understand that X implies Y, and then Y implies Z, and Z implies W, and W implies X, and so on, ad infinitum. But if you say, well, we have free will because of of the randomness or chancy aspects of nature, that doesn't give you free choice either because random just means you can't predict it. That doesn't give you free choice just because you can't predict something. It's like it's like the lottery. Like the lottery is random, but that doesn't mean you can freely choose what the winning numbers are going to be. You can just guess, and you may be right and you may be wrong. Most people are going to be wrong. So rant a rant. That was the other way people tried to figure it out. Agatha says hello, good night, sir. I'm here. What's up, Agatha? But yeah, so that was the way. That was the sort of escapism was. Oh well, maybe it's randomness that gives us free will, and it doesn't. Uh, so where does that leave us? So here's where it stands today. Right now, we look at, like I said, if we look at things like behavioral and cognitive neuroscience, as well as like things like philosophy of mind and things like game theory, um, we find out just because things are deterministic doesn't rule out the fact that you can still have choices. It's just that these choices aren't free in the way that people have postulated in the past because the sort of freedom that they postulate is somewhat like quasi religious. And that's the problem because people want free will, usually because if they have a religious bent, they want free will to say, well, this is how, because free, because within a Judeo-Christian context, people have postulated that free will is how you get around the problem of evil. And I should probably break that down too. Problem of evil is given that there's a all loving, all benevolent, all powerful, all knowing God that controls reality. Why is there so much human misery and suffering in the world? And usually the salvo amongst religious folk were because of free will. So if you take free will, then the problem of evil comes back with 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 more vigor because that was their way out. Oh well, he gave us free will, so that's why some people still do evil shit. No. Okay. Um, that's the problem. So, like I said, looking at neuroscience, we determine free will is an illusion. So is the self. Uh, our concept of the self is also an illusion, but maybe I should save that for another day. Um, Blackbeard says, I don't know anything about this topic at all, but what is free will defined as here in society? There are consequences, but are the choices you still make not free will? That's a great question. So that's actually part of the problem, Blackbeard, is that for one problem, like I said, the major problem is the fact that what we know about scientific psychology today shows us there's no role for free will in an explanation of human behavior. That's the number one problem. The second problem, the second problem is conceptual. Like there's no agreement on exactly what free will is. So your guess and my guess is as good as anyone else's. Like there's literally no agreement because there's no expertise on this. You can take one class on this and you know just as much as the most learned person on this subject. That's why I gave such a vague definition because because there is no widely agreed upon definition. Like I said, usually free will is conceptualized as some sort of agency that humans and maybe some animals possess to give them the freedom to make choices and judgments apart from deterministic laws of nature. But given what we know now about human nature and animal nature through ethology, we see there's no role for free will in that explanation. The other problem is again, we don't know. No one can agree on what free will is. Like I said, the most recent way people have tried to define it was randomness. And like I just tried to spell out before, randomness doesn't give you free will because saying something is random just means that you can't predict it. That doesn't give that doesn't make that choice any more free than a deterministic choice. Randomness just means it's unknown. That doesn't give us human freedom in the way that many people have um, historically looked upon free will. Uh, so there's no I, I, there's no explanation. So this is how philosophy makes progress. Often the way we solve problems in philosophy is that we don't have a positive answer for things. We usually dissolve a problem by giving a negative and qualified answer, which is we know that outside of outside of taking it on faith, there's no reason to believe in free will. So that is the answer. But again, there are many advocates of free will within philosophy as well as within religious circles. And these folks are called libertarians, metaphysical libertarians. Okay. But again, none of them can really agree upon what they define as free will. Um, and there's a further twist. that I'm about to spell out. I'm down looking up some information now so I can speak about it. Um, Now, the late great Daniel Dennett, philosopher who died last summer, was a compatibilist. He believed that free will is compatible with determinism, and he believed what I don't like about his argument is he basically said even if free will isn't true, we need to act as if it is, and not tell others that it's an illusion. And here's why: there are psychological studies that show that once you let people know that free will is not scientific and that is an illusion, many of those folks go on to display very reckless behavior because once they believe that their once they believe that their choices and behavior isn't freely chosen by themselves, there's some sort of either dismay in that, or they think, well, I can't be responsible for my choices anyway. So if I decide to do bad shit, then it's not my responsibility. And that gets into the whole other side area of does if free will is an illusion, that does is that now and does that now mean that people can't be morally responsible for their behavior? So again, unfortunately, there's so we have data, evidence suggesting that a lot of people, when told that free will is an illusion, will display reckless behavior because now they think, whatever irresponsible behavior did they uh, did they enact is beyond their control, and that's not true. Being given that human nature is governed by scientific laws does not mean that you're not morally responsible for your behavior, unless and only unless, like I said, you are mentally ill, suffering from some sort of brain damage or neurological disorder, or you're currently under the influence of some sort of controlled substance, or you are cognitively impaired or very young. So, outside of those things, you are still morally responsible for your behavior, even if free will is an illusion. I mean, we know the self is an illusion too, but most people haven't given up. I most people haven't given up the 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 idea that there are certain things they do and don't want to happen to them, even though the self itself is an illusion, which is actually a bunch of different modular areas of the mind working in unison together like an orchestra to give us the illusion of us being one unified self. But you don't see people flipping out about that. But you see people wigging out when they find out that free will is an illusion. So the late philosopher Daniel Dennett says, even if free will is an illusion, we need to behave as if it's real, and we need not tell other people that is not that free will isn't real, which I find very elitist. And I'm not against intellectual elitism necessarily, but I find that kind of disturbing to say, well, the lower intelligent people, we must keep them under the illusions that free will is real. Otherwise, they'll go amok. They'll run amok. That's very condescending to me. Um, One says, guys, share with friends, chat, like and subscribe, and super chat is on the bottom right of your screens. Blackbeard says, I feel like that brings up the question if humans at nature have any morals. So, yeah, so it gets back into my that gets actually back into my discussion yesterday when I actually defended moral realism or a weak version of moral realism. Um, Mona says, I don't agree with holding back science nor philosophy because some double blind study of others' reckless behavior. He said all theories should be explored fully until proven fact or wrong science. I mean, I get what Daniel Dennett is saying. Like I said, the evidence does show that when people are told that free will is an illusion, that they behave more recklessly. However, I think the devil is in the details. If you also explain to them that yes, free will may be an illusion, but you still have choices because of those very laws of human behavior, and because of such, you're still morally responsible for that behavior. Then I think that people won't act as recklessly. I think when you just it's all in the framing, and we know in psychology the framing effects. The way you frame something can completely change how people view it, even though you're giving them the very same content, right? So if you, like I said, if you just tell people, well, free will is an illusion, that shit doesn't matter, then people will be like, okay, so it doesn't matter what I do. You put it to them like, well, free will may be an illusion, but the laws of neuroscience actually show how it actually gives us choices, gives us the ability to make our own choices, and then and because of those choices, we can do we can do right or we can do wrong. If you give it to them that way, I think a lot of people won't behave as recklessly. So I think it's all in their framing. Um, and then when you're talking about morality, then like I said, the moral relativist would just say, well, yeah, that's because morals don't exist anyway. It's all subjective. Whereas the the onus is on the onus is on the moral realist to say why, if free will is an illusion, why we can still be held morally responsible. That's the onus again is so the onus is on the moral realist, not on the relativist. So the relativist gets his get out of jail free card. He say, well, hey, I'm a moral relativist, so it doesn't even matter if free will is an illusion because morality is fake anyway. So, but the moral realist has to be like, well, damn, how do I explain this? And that's when you go back on the evolutionary psychology and realize, well, actually, morality is driven by our these be- behavioral instincts we all have for what we feel is just and unjust and how we are to be treated or to treat others. And this is why every culture has cultural taboos against rape, murder, incest, arson, theft, and dishonesty, among other things. And that there seems to be, and that the reason why these cultural taboos are universal is because they're all innate, meaning there's something tangible about it because it's written into human behavior. And if so, that means that we are literally born with the ability to to behave morally. And given a more advanced neuroscience, maybe 100 years into the future, we may perfectly understand all of that. But as it stands now, we can just say, well, we do know through evolutionary psychology that morality is, and there is indeed some moral precepts which are innate, and that we all share these same instincts. how we interpret them is culturally driven, but we all have these same moral instincts, which are innate and part of our evolution as humans. And as such, not having free will is not going to get us past that. You're still going to be held responsible for your moral behavior or lack thereof. So I don't know if that fully. I, I don't know if that's fully convincing, but it's a start. As long as it gives us some sort of leg on which to keep building and exploring that, then that's a good start. At least we have a start. But I understand it's not a fully convincing it's not a fully convincing story, but it 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 gives us somewhere to build, right? Uh Melissa says stupid question, but does chaos theory fit? Like if something can go wrong, it will eventually, hence all my horrendous misspellings and grammar. LOL. No, remember I was just talking about that. I was like how we got into looking at like the role of, well, how we got into a deeper explanation of human behavior is through like, game theory and behavioral science and cognitive psychology and related things like that. But again, chaos theory doesn't help because, like I said, this is what I was just saying like a few minutes ago, is that randomness doesn't give us free will. Randomness just means everything is unpredictable. That to say that if you replace so if you replace determinism, well, if you replace scientific laws of human behavior with randomness that doesn't give you free will, it just means that everything is unpredictable. Human behavior being unpredictable doesn't give you free will. That's what I was saying. That's why chaos theory doesn't work. Um, Blackbeard says, do you think that's explained by evolution? Like earlier humans didn't have such strong innate morals. It came from hundreds of years of development and then societal standards. Well, that's what I was just getting to. Is evolutionary psychology shows how people like early humans basically subscribe to some unwritten social agreement on how to behave towards one another, that they can that they can coexist peacefully, more or less. Because I mean, you read things like Jeremy Bentham's The Leviathan, and we talk about before there was government, which is the Leviathan in Jeremy Bentham's book. Before government, we were in the endless state of tribal warfare. Just and he basically said that life before there was any sort of government was just short, nasty, and brutish. So the people who evolved, well, the individuals who saw that there are better ways to behave, that if we give up a little bit of our freedom to do anything we want for the sake of working together in unison as a group, probably out competed the people who could only act in their own self-interest all the time, who were just pure egoists. That's egoism means, uh, acting in your own self-interest, which is why egoism has been considered a ethical theory at one point, and it's been dismissed as a horrible ethical theory, because obviously, just because there's psychological egoism, which is the fact that people off act within their self-interest, doesn't mean that we can say that that's what's the moral thing to do, is to act on one's self-interest, because obviously that can be detrimental and self-defeating. So anyway, the people who stepped aside and said we should act in a collective nature for the so that we all can thrive, maybe with less freedoms, were were the ones who were going to be more successful than individuals who were just pure egoists that said, I'm just going to act in whatever capacity I want in my own self interest. If I want that woman, I'm just a bash her on the back of the head and take her to my cave. And oh, oh, that guy, he eating real good over there with that mastodon. Look here, player, take this, take this, take this quiver of arrows. Yeah, player, take your mastodon and your bitch. So that works out well till he, hey, that works out well till he turns when he gets old. Then same thing happens to him. Like, wait, come on, Playboy, don't do this to me. There's like, didn't you do that to Tunk 20 years ago? Times of the tables have turned, Playboy. So that doesn't work. The acting just completely in your own self interest doesn't work because sooner or later you're going to be a victim yourself. You're, you know, when you're young and you're strong, you can be the predator. Once you get old, you're the prey. So this is why also in many traditional and collectivist cultures there's such a reverence for the elderly, because in traditional collectivist cultures we see the elderly as they've paved the way, and we ought to respect them because in our own age we want people to do the same for us. People in individualistic cultures like here in the West forget that shit, which is why I've never seen as much disrespect towards middle age and elderly people as I have today amongst Gen Z and Gen Alpha. They have no respect for for adults because they're little single mothers, single baby mamas haven't raised them with respect because they're bitter towards men because they can't keep one. But anyway, I'm getting off topic. um, but yes, so evolution definitely plays a part in this. And again, chaos theory or randomness doesn't get you out of this quandary because randomness just means unpredictable. It doesn't give you free choice in the sense that advocates of free will would want. Catherine says, I think some behavior traits are in the DNA and are passed down. Well, here's the thing, Kat. So in behavioral genetics, we find out that all, remember, you probably remember hearing me say this before. The law, the law of behavioral genetics is that all human traits are partly hereditary. All human traits, both behavioral, both which means behavioral traits, personality traits, and physical traits, as well as medical illness, mental illness. All of that's hereditary, at least partly hereditary. All of it. Not saying it's fully hereditary, like it's gonna be 1 to 1. Like, oh, he has schizophrenia, you gonna have schizophrenia. Oh, he's short, you gonna be short. Oh, he got a big, you gonna have big. So, I'm not complaining. But anyway, um, but yeah, so yes, all human traits are at least partly hereditary, and that's the law of behavioral genetics. Um, Chaz says, as long as you ain't a man that wear a suit, you're cool to me. Huh? Wait, so if I was to wear a suit, you wouldn't listen to me? That I don't know if that's a good thing, but moving on. Moon says, "LOL." The name TikTok. I just made that up. I just made that up. Blackbeard says, "I like the mastodon analogy." Laugh my butt off. Yeah, guys, I'm silly and it's late. That's why I call it late night philosophy. If you want to know a good philosopher who really has some silly stuff but made really compelling arguments, is Jerry Fodor, who he's like one of the founders of cognitive science, and actually gave us the uh, the computational representational theory of the mind. Although he kind of went back on some aspects of it, but whatever. Jerry Fodor is a lot of philosophy is dry, especially analytic philosophy is often accused of being dry, but Jerry Fodor is definitely the exception to that. Unfortunately, he died several years ago. Like all my favorite philosophical heroes have died. Even one of my former professors I found out died during the pandemic. Dr. Stanley Jack Odell. He was one of my favorite professors there. Um, I'm about to buy one of his books on Amazon right now because I just found out last summer he passed away, but he passed away back in 2021, 2022, and I didn't know, so I'm gonna buy one of his books as a remembrance of him, since he taught me my first one of my first philosophy classes. He taught me like it was one of my first classes in philosophy, and it was a senior level class. Even though it was like my first philosophy class, and I'm taking a senior level class, and I got a B. And so after when the class concluded, I was like, Dr. Odell, I was like, should I still take philosophy 100? He was like, why? He's like, you just took my metaphysics class. He said this class is usually for seniors and first year grad students, and you got a B. He's like, there's no need for you to take philosophy 100. You're already above that. I'm like, cool. So, uh, Carbon says, what thoughts on the quantum theory and the idea that everything in the universe is connecting some way through energy? That's not the topic for today. We can do that on another day. Unless you want to drop that in the super chat. If you drop that in the super chat, I'll answer that. That's really kind of uh, off the topic for today, which is free will versus determinism. This is one of those classic metaphysical debates: free will versus determinism, which I told people months ago I was going to get into one day. So he just spell his name. So Jerry Fodor. That's Jerry Gerry Fodor Fodor. He's of Jewish descent, so it's Fodor Fodor. He taught at MIT. It was funny because like one of my professors learned under him, but he was going to Harvard, which was funny. All the Harvard folks when he was there were Quinians, like Willard Van Orman Quine. Um, Quinians were like these hardcore behaviorists, so they kind of rejected the mental realism because behaviorists just uh, philosophical behaviorists generally believe that there's no role for uh, mental constructs and a scientific explanation of human behavior. Uh, that is psychological behaviorism, whereas the mental realists like Jerry Fodor and Noam Chomsky, who's another founder of cognitive science, are saying, well, no, actually, most of the most of uh, most of what we think of human behavior can be explained through these mental constructs, and these mental constructs are real. Like, and he gave us a theory of mind. Noam Chomsky gave us um, an explanation of a scientific linguistics that um, takes as real many of those mental constructs. So both of them together are like the gods of cognitive science. Luckily, we still have Noam Chomsky with us, but Fodor has unfortunately passed away. Catherine says, I agree with that. Carbon. Howard says, nice. Moon says, Jerry Fodor. Yes, Jerry with a J, not a G. Um, Omar says, do you believe in heaven and hell? Again, that is not a topic for today, my brother. That's complete. Like I said, I, I don't I don't mind answering questions outside of the topic, but if you want to ask me something outside of the topic, please do so in a super chat. I don't care if you drop just 1 cent, because you can do it through the rubies. If you see that little icon on your screen with the little ruby thing, You can click that, drop me a ruby. I'll answer a question that is off topic. But if the question is the but if the question if you're not going to drop it in a super chat or in a or drop me one of the rubies, then I'll try to keep on topic, please. And will do, Catherine. Drink water. Hell, hydrate. That's funny. Do you remember how cool it was? Is irrelevant. Do you remember how cool it was back in 2014 and 2015 when everyone was saying Hell Hydra? Especially, well, especially if you went to conventions, you went to like comic book conventions, and people would just be like, Hell Hydra. And it was cool because even people from DC Comics were saying that's how cool it was. Like, I literally seen people from DC comic writers and artists sitting next to like people from Marvel Comics, be like, Hell Hydra. Yeah, that used to be so funny. Thank you, Harmon. He dropped me a. I appreciate that, brother. So let me get back to your question. So you said, what are your thoughts on the quantum theory and the idea that everything in the universe is connected in some way through energy? So first, let me state by saying this: I do not understand quantum theory, and most people don't. Actually, I think most people don't, and that's including the physicists themselves. Richard Feynman even said to himself, the Nobel winning physicist uh, Richard Feynman himself said, he said, I don't understand quantum theory, and I'm pretty sure no one else does either. Mind you, he won a Nobel for being able to give um, uh, a depiction of how to physically map quantum interactions. So this, I think that's what he got his Nobel Prize for, is actually showing how to physically portray different sorts of quantum interactions. And he himself said, I don't understand quantum theory, and I'm pretty sure most other physicists don't either. So I want to first say that, because I think we should keep ourselves intellectually honest, right? And as far as the idea that everything in the universe is connected in some way through energy, that's not what quantum theory says exactly. Um, if you're saying that everything that if you're saying that everything is connected through the different physical forces or what they say are physical interactions now, you have strong inter the strong nuclear force, the weak nuclear force, um, electromagnetic force, uh, gravitational force. And again, a lot of physicists say these aren't forces at all. These are all just different interactions amongst these different subatomic particles to give off forces or fields, which is the difference between the different um, nature of quantum particles, either fermions or bosons. Again, I'm not going to try to do armchair physics because I would be being intellectually dishonest to pretend like I know all this stuff beyond my physics for dummy class I took in college and my astronomy class. Um, but it quantum theory basically explains the behavior of nature on the on the on the micro level. That's what quantum theory does. It explains all of nature at the micro level, whereas general relativity explains all of nature on the macro level. I think a lot of people have taken umbrage with quantum theory to imbue it with some sort of quasi religious or mystical underpinnings, which in itself isn't a part of quantum theory. Thank you, Blackbeard. He also dropped me a super. Appreciate it, brother. Thank you, and have a good night as well. Thank you again. Um, so uh Carmen's had to support. I appreciate your acknowledgement. Thank you. Yeah, I'm never gonna lie to folks. If I don't know something, I'm not gonna gas you guys. I'm not gonna gaslight you and pretend I know something I don't. This is actually um push quick aside here. This is actually what Socrates meant when people um the quote, all I know is that I know nothing. That's not actually what he said. It's a horrible mistranslation of what he said. What Socrates said is if I if I know anything, is that he said, well, if as you know is if the oracle of Delph the oracle at Delphi is right, that I'm the wisest man in Athens, is only because I don't pretend to know things that I don't know. He said, unlike all these other folks who are claimed to be the wisest men of Athens, he said I went around talking to all these folks, trying to learn more through them because I didn't believe myself that the oracle was right, that I was the wisest man in Athens. But then when I come up to all these folks and find out that they're all pretending to know things that they really don't know, once I put them to, put a few questions to them, which is, the Socratic method, right? Um, so he said, so what I do know is that, you know, if I'm the wisest man in Athens, is only because I pretend not to know what I don't know. So in that vein, I want to extend that intellectual humility to myself and say that I don't understand enough about quantum theory or physics generally to say that I can say um, what quantum theory is. On top of that, um, there's no there's no universally agreed upon interpretation of quantum theory. There's different interpretations. There's the so-called standard interpretation, which is the Niels Bohr inter- um, interpretation. It's often called the standard or Copenhagen interpretation of uh, quantum mechanics. That has been the mainstay for a long time, up until probably the past 20, 30 years, where the Everett's many world hypothesis or interpretation of quantum mechanics um, came about, as it is implied in the title, Everett's many worlds hypothesis. That interpretation of quantum mechanics requires there to be a multiverse, whereas the standard Copenhagen interpretation interpret the cosmos to be a singular universe. And there's actually many other interpretations, but those are the two most widely known ones. There was other ones proposed. Einstein had his own version, which was not widely received, although it deals although it gets around many of the problems of the standard Copenhagen interpretation, and many of these fall around the concept of the weight of the wave function. Some interpretations of quantum theory interpret the wave function as as a physical reality, whereas others posit the wave function as merely um, hypothetical, um, and others interpret the wave function as being observable, whereas others find it fundamentally inobservable, um, and believe that once you do observe it, the wave function collapses. And I'm not going to pretend to know exactly what the wave function is, so I'm going to actually look it up for you guys so I can actually tell you what the wave function is in quantum mechanics. because that kind of gets into many of the different interpretations of quantum theory. So the wave function in quantum mechanics, again, depending on how you look at it, is either a mathematical function or a physical reality. But for this definition is in quantum mechanics, a wave function is a mathematical function that describes the quantum state of a particle, essentially providing the probability of finding a particle at a specific location in space at a given time, represented by the Greek letter psi and calculated by squaring its value at that point. It is considered the quote unquote wave as aspect of a particle's behavior according to the theory of wave particle duality. Because in quantum mechanics, starting with the work that you know Einstein did, as well as the split, the what is it, the split, what you call it, experiment showed that light can act both as a wave and a particle, and then they found out it wasn't just with uh, light particles, aka photons, but with all subatomic particles have a wave particle duality to them. In any case, the, how the wave function is interpreted is sort of the differences in the different interpretations of quantum theory. And I don't think any of us know enough, including the experts who study this stuff, know enough that we can say how that impacts us on as far as human nature is involved. So I hope that answers the question. The coffee, I think that coffee kicked in. Let me get some water. Mona says good stuff. Blackbeard. Omar says DC Comics is cool. Yep, DC Comics is my favorite, but Marvel is also, well, they're kind of equally my favorites, but in different respects. Cass says I'm still getting my head around it. I did a 4-day workshop last week that covered quantum physics. It's interesting. I don't think you can do a 4-day workshop on quantum physics because literally people delve there, study it their entire lifetimes. And again, if a Nobel winning, if a Nobel laureate physicist like Richard Feynman doesn't understand it, I'm pretty sure the rest of us who don't even do physics as a career don't know it. A lot of people think they know it because they'll read some dumbed down book by Brian Greene or Stephen Hawking or Neil deGrasse Tyson or that Japanese guy who writes horrible books. But anyway, you cannot do physics, whether quantum, classical, or otherwise, without doing the math. It's similar to like analytic philosophy. You can't do analytic philosophy without being able to do rudimentary rudimentary first order logic. So when people pretend to know philosophy or pretend to know physics, but they can't handle the the, the formal reasoning behind it, they don't know it. So like I said, you can't do you can't do contemporary philosophy without having a background in logic. You fundamentally can't because the, the logic course is required as part of the philosophical curriculum. It like for a lot of people who are mediocre students, and this typically are liberal arts students. I'm going to be completely real. A lot of liberal arts students are mediocre students, which is why they tend to go to liberal arts because they're scared of math. Then they try to do philosophy, then they realize, oh, well, philosophy actually requires uh, you have to learn mathematical logic, meaning that they have to have the prerequisite for doing logic is knowing college algebra. And after they find that out, many of them leave philosophy. that that's kind of like a weed out class in philosophy. It's it's not defined as a weed out class, but it acts as a de facto weed out class. Just like for pre-med, you have to pass organic chemistry. That's your weed out class for pre-med students is organic chemistry, orgo. Um, and for physics and engineering students, they have to do high level mathematics. You have to know how to do like a, like calculus 3, differential equations, linear algebra, um, probability. For me as a psychology student, I only had to do probability. I could have taken calculus, but I took probability because it was more relevant to psychology because we have to take behavioral statistics. That's one of our for psychology. That's probably our weed out. Well, at least in my curriculum, there was like probably two weed out classes: behavioral statistics and biopsychology. A lot of people who are again mediocre students couldn't handle the rigor of biopsychology. So anyway, uh, Omar said yes, it is very complicated. Catherine says everything is energy and has a vibration, and everything is connected through those vibrations. That's not true. That is only people who believe in string theory. String theory is starting to fall out of favor in academic circles. It has been pushed for the last 40 years, but it has yielded no results. The problem with string theory is it's completely it's untestable, and people in science cringe at anything that's untestable. If something's untestable, that makes it not very scientific. Like scientists can be very comfortable with a doing a priori science. When I say a priori science, I mean science through just reason alone, without experimentation and stuff like that. But at some point, there has to be some testability on those claims. So even if you can work out the science without it, like everything Einstein did was like uh, a priori science. He was a theoretical physicist, but there were other people who came along, like uh, like Eddington, who actually tested his claims, and they worked out to be amazingly accurate. Everything is not vibrations. That's again, this is why I said people who think they know quantum theory don't know quantum theory. Like I said, a Nobel laureate, Richard Feynman, literally gave us um, a way to graph quantum interactions. And he himself still said, "I don't understand quantum theory," and I'm pretty sure no physicist does. No other physicist does either. So for people taking a workshop in quantum physics, that's not no, they're not. They're taking some new age stuff that has nothing to do with academic. That has nothing to do with actual science, like scientific physics. That's new age stuff. You can't take 8 years of science in a 4 day workshop. It's just for the same reason you can't do a full day workshop in Muay Thai and expect to become the heavyweight champion of Muay Thai. It takes years and years of dedication and work. You, for the same reason, you're not going to become a Muay Thai champion after doing a 4 day seminar at at Lupini Stadium. You're not going to become a well versed in physics in a 4 day workshop. It's impossible. Almost as my dad had a degree in physics, but I just played guitar. That's what's up. Almost as, do you think there's any truth to that movie, The Matrix? No. Here's why. One, the Matrix is based on an old philosophical. Um, I'm gonna get back to free will versus determinism, but this is kind of related. The Matrix deals in an old skeptical argument called the brain the brain and the vat hypothesis, which is just a modern spin on the Cartesian thought experiment that what if everything I thought I knew was really me being deceived by a demon or evil scientist. So the brain in the vat is just a modern day spin on that. The brain in the vat hypothesis is what if for all I for all I think I know and have experienced, really I'm just a brain in a vat. Having all these experiences of walking around, smashing chicks, going to going to Coachella, getting my master's degree in engineering, um, driving driving that Lambo with the suicide doors. Oh, I shouldn't have said that word. Anyway, um, taking hella trips all over the world. Really, none of that even happened. I'm just a brain in the vat. The Matrix is just is another take on that the brain in the vat hypothesis, which is for all I know, what if I'm actually stuck in a world where all humans are just raised from from a young age to have these experiences while they're actually using our life to power their machinery. It doesn't even make sense because for one, the physics of it doesn't the physics and biology of it doesn't add up because it actually takes more energy to keep those humans alive than it would to use those humans as a battery. It would make more sense if instead of keep using each human as a battery for the machinery, that they linked all of them together mentally in one huge mental neural network. But using their bodies as batteries doesn't make sense because you literally put in more. You literally have to use more energy to sustain those human bodies than it is to extract energy from those human bodies to power the machinery. So there's no truth to the matrix. It's biologically impossible. Again, you actually take it would take more energy to keep all those billions of humans alive as batteries than it would to extract the energy from them. Now, if it were the case instead that you were all using them in some sort of massive neural network system, then that could at least be that could at least be conceivable. But even with that, the question becomes: given that given that mere possibility, what would underwrite this being a genuine being genuinely likely to happen? And as we don't really have anything to underwrite that to say that that would be a real thing. Melissa says string theory cat Michio Kaku. Yeah, he's not. Michio Kaku is not well received within the academic world of actual physicists. Like they look at him as a kook. So one of the things when you look at expertise is that you have to look at the person's reputation within that field. Are they well received within their community of fellow intellectuals within that particular field of study? If not, that is a red flag that that person is probably spilling nonsense. And like I said, string theory has been on the outskirts for the last several years. A lot of people are starting to go against it. The problem was it was kind of force fed to physics students for the past 40 years because a lot of a lot of graduate students to be able to go to the illustrious schools they want to get into, they had to they had to basically subscribe to some version of string theory to undergo their doctoral programs because when you when you become a grad student in some sort of doctoral program, you basically agree to undertake whatever research your faculty advisor is doing. So if your faculty advisor is an advocate of string theory and that's what he's actively researching, then that's what you are researching, and that's sort of how it got bullied onto the mainstream of physics. But a lot of people started rebelling against it because it's not yielded any testable predictions whatsoever. It almost died out 30 years ago into this really brilliant physicist. People have basically said he was the second coming of Albert Einstein. He basically took all the different variants of string theory and said, you know what? It's not that string theory is false. It's that all these flavors of string theory are actually just one theory, which is M theory. So he came up with M theory and said all these different variants of string theory all make up one super theory, which is M theory, which is postulated as a theory of everything. And that's what kept string theory going for the past 30 years. Is this brilliant guy, which I can't remember his name. Actually, I can look his name up for you guys. What's up, Asia? She says, howdy, everyone. Haven't seen you in a while. Uh, my cute Asia here. Give me 1 second. I'm going to look up this guy so I can give you the name to him. And then after we're going back to um, free will versus determinism. Yeah, but the guy who created M theory was Edward Witten. And again, this was like in 1995, like the year I graduated, where he basically saved string theory because string theory was dying 30 years ago, guys, because it yielded no testable results. So he said, you know, it's not that string theory is false. He says that all these different variants of string theory are just components of one theory, which is M theory. So it says M theory was proposed by physicist Edward Witten at a string theory conference in 1995, where he suggested that the different versions of string theory could be unified under a single theory called M theory. The M could stand for membrane, magic, or mystery, depending on interpretation. All right, so there you go. Cass says, okay, cool, Moonlit. Moonlit says, I need a drink. I'm too dumb for this. Be right back. Hi, Asia. Thank you for the sub. And Asia's a cutie, guys. So show her some love. Aga says, hello, Catherine. So Carbon says that Omar, I do believe that movie had a message behind it when taking into consideration that mathematical fractals are responsible for consciousness. It is interesting to dig into. That's not the case at all. Again, um, con- depending on what you mean by consciousness, because people use it, that is a very ambiguous term, unfortunately. But again, given I have studied consciousness both in psychology and philosophy, there's nothing about fractals that that gives rise to consciousness. Assuming there indeed is consciousness. Another thing that we've thrown away in philosophy is the belief in consciousness, at least phenomenal consciousness. Like obviously the weak versions of consciousness we do believe in, but the type of consciousness that people talk about when in like sort of more speculative ways, we don't believe that exists. At least many of us don't. Fractals have nothing to have nothing to do with consciousness whatsoever. Like you will not take any neuroscience class, cognitive science class, or philosophy class where I've heard fractals give rise to consciousness. I again, I think people take. I think the fact that people don't know a lot about physics gives them it gives them reason to think they can use it to speculate on things, and that's not the case. Being ignorant of a topic does not mean that it's open game to use it for other things that we don't understand. So uh Catherine says it was a snippet. Carmen says thank you for your time for sharing. It's nice to hear another perspective on the subject. No problem. Agnes says I'm listening to this. It's deep. Mona says W Carbon, W Agatha. Cass is like, share, subscribe, buy a coffee, or drop a super chat to Carrion. I might start saying buy me a water. But Omar says, how old was Harriet algebra and trigonometry? Huh? I think these are some misspellings here. I Cat says doesn't mean it's not real. Well, yes, it does mean it's not real. If something is not testable, that gives us reason to believe that it's not real. The reason science makes progress is because there's a built-in skepticism into the scientific methodology that claims must the claims that we make about the world must be somehow testable. This is what's this is why science gives us an accurate portrayal of the world, whereas religion doesn't, because science is constantly self-correcting. Even when it gets things wrong, that eventually gets pointed out. Oh, okay, wait, all the stuff you guys are doing is wrong. In science, in psychology, we recently had this revelation back in 2013 when we find out that half of the textbook studies were not replicable. So people like, oh shit. So there was this crisis behavioral science because this was affecting all behavioral science, but psychology the most out of all of them, where they were finding out a lot of these classic studies there are in all our textbooks. Half of them can't even be replicated. That's a good thing that we find that out because that means, hey, we're not going to keep pushing false information. We're going to correct it and give you guys better information, which is going to give us a better understanding of human behavior and the mental processes that underlie it. Same thing in physics or any other scientific field. There are paradigm shifts where you'll have a whole bunch of people working under a certain research program or under a particular paradigm, and more evidence will come in to show, yeah, that stuff is wrong. And what often is the case is that some people will jump ship to the new to the new research program, or what will typically happen is a lot of people who did the older research will just die off, unfortunately, and the people under the new paradigm will end up thriving. I think that's going to happen with these string theory advocates. A lot of people are going to find out, well, these guys were pushing this narrative about string theory for 50 years just because they liked how elegant the mathematical equations were. But the problem is, hey, none of this research these guys were doing gave us any testable results. The strength of a scientific theory is the ability to make predictions and explain things that weren't previously to explain things that previously weren't explicable. If it can't do that, it's not science. It's not useful. You're basically just you're basically just preaching a secular religion. If this is what's wrong with like gender ideology is is basically a quasi religion because there's no biological science backing up gender ideology. And string theory is suffering this right now. There's a lot of people saying string theory like there's literally like physicists now saying string theory is fugazi, and they're saying the only reason it is lived on for this long is because of the genius Edward Witten, who in 1995 went to this physics conference and said all these variants of string theory are all part of one overall singular theory, which is M theory, and he saved it and kept it going for the next 30 years. But you can only do a scientific theory is not going to live forever without giving some sort of testable predictions. It's going to be labeled pseudoscience at some point. And string theory is falling slowly, not yet, because there's still very eminent scientists who back it. But when they die off, there's no testable predictions. It's going to it's going to go under the it's going to it's going to be falsified. This happened with supersymmetry 10 years ago we thought with the Large Hadron Collider that eventually we will find these supersymmetric particles as they gave as the Large Hadron Collider was finally given its full power to operate. Never found them. And it's like, well, maybe is at is at powers that the Large Hadron Collider hasn't been able to produce yet. Possible, but at some point, the ad hoc hypothesizing, where you keep trying to save a bad theory by saying, well, if you do this, well, if you do that, if you do this, then it'll be true. Like that can only happen so many times till you say, well, we can't say this theory. So supersymmetry is pretty much dead in physics now. There's very few people who are advocates of it, but there were people who were very excited about supersymmetry. I would say just 15 years ago, but I would say as of at least 20 about 2015, maybe 2016, when the Large Hadron Collider just couldn't find these hypothesized supersymmetric particles. The supersymmetry theory is dead. And I read a whole book on it. I was excited about this back in like 2011, 2012, because I just knew this was going to get discovered, just like the Higgs boson eventually got discovered, which gives us the blueprint for all of um, for the standard model of particle physics. But anyway, I'm gonna get off that. This is not dealing with determinism versus free will. Uh, Agnes' algebra is really hard. Never liked it. Yeah, I'm just saying. Like in college, you're typically expected to do some college level math, which is algebra. It comes under different names. Um, you can take college algebra. You can take what's the enter uh, I forgot what it's called. Did something mathematics, but it's basically college level algebra. But basically, I was basically just saying as an example that logic is a weed out class for people who are philosophy students or prospective philosophy students. Like if they can't do logic, they can't do philosophy unless they want to take like a philosophy through literature sort of class major, which is what is often continental philosophy, which is like philosophical literature, like learning about Albert Camus, Martin Heidegger, Arthur Schopenhauer, and um, Simone Beauvoir, and all those folks. Moon says, however, isn't free will versus determinism literally feel like, doesn't it literally feel like the red versus blue pill from Matrix? Nah, I guess very loosely. I don't see. I don't put it that way because, like, so with the blue pill, like you're choosing to live. It's different because people people who believe in free will, libertarians, aren't choosing to live in ignorance, which is the blue pill. People who choose the blue pill say, "Hey, I know this shit is fake, but I'd rather live in this fake bliss than live in the nast the in this cold brutish reality." So I don't really think that's the same because libertarians think most libertarians would genuinely think that what genuinely would think that free will is something that exists. They're not choosing to like be blissfully ignorant, which is what people who would take the blue pill would do. So it's not exactly the same. Like they genuinely believe what they say. Omar says, "Okay, I want to know why the government has acid under so much control." What? What? Um, you're gonna have to drop super chat for that because that's completely unrelated to what we've been talking about. I'm not even. I don't even understand the question of that. Almost as, do you believe that Einstein was right in a lot of the things we talked about? Whether he was right or not, he fundamentally changed how we think about reality. So we have to give him credit for that. But yes, a lot of things he was right about. He won a Nobel Prize for his discovery of Brownian motion, which led to his his theory of special relativity that he extrapolated upon, which became general relativity. And although he never himself, unfortunately, he himself never got a Nobel Prize for general relativity, but other people who then tested general relativity for him did get Nobel Prizes. So every time someone tested his theory and it proved to be correct, that was a further um, there was a further confirmation of his theories, right? So most of the stuff that we that he talked about, and he's one of the founders of quantum theory himself, although he later himself thought it was an incomplete theory, which is because he did not like the chancy and indeterministic nature of it. He thought that a complete description of physical reality would take away the statistical nature of nature, because again, he was one of those people who believed, like the guy Simon Laplace that I mentioned an hour ago. He was one of those people who believed, like Simon Laplace, that a full understanding of nature will be completely deterministic, that X implies Y and Y implies Z, and so on. Like there won't be any missing links in that chain of causality. But we we learned that that's just not true of physics. That at the most fundamental aspects of nature, which is quantum theory, that nature is chancy and rather indeterministic. Um, and he, tried to give his own interpretation of quantum theory, but he never, but it was never widely accepted. And then he also he spent he spent his few remaining years before he died working on a theory of everything, but he never got anywhere with it. So if there's anywhere where he failed, was that he couldn't come up with a theory of everything, and he was wrong that quantum theory that a better understanding of quantum theory would rule out the statistical nature of reality. It's just a fact of it just seems a fact of the matter now that all of nature is of is is governed through probabilistic laws. Um, so yeah, almost as yes, I would like to say with the eggs, I don't care if it's fake. I do. Um, when I eat some fried chicken, I want it to be real. If I hit some glorious if I clap some glorious cheeks, I want them cheeks to be real. I don't want fake cheeks. I want real cheeks to clap. Clap, 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 clap. Stop. But I'm sorry. I'm taking the red pill. I want to clap real cheeks. They may not be as perfect as the fake cheeks in the blue pill world, but those cheeks in the red pill world, at least I know they're real. Just clapping them up. Stop. I know that's a very crude example, but sometimes it takes crude examples to get to, like, you know to get people a better understanding of things. And by the way, guys, so anything we just covered that you did not understand, let me know, and I'll retread that territory for you. But this is late night philosophy. Matter of fact, it's already past midnight, so I'm gonna call this a day pretty soon. No, no one, nothing, nada. Cat, there's an Australian holiday today. My wife was just telling me she she said good thing is a Australian holiday today because the where she works she handles clients in that part of the world and places like Australia, New Zealand, and Singapore, places like that. Almost says I can't wait to have a girlfriend. What are you waiting for? Go go get one. They're glorious. Unless you're young, then I'll say wait. Don't get get your degree first. Get your career, then get a girlfriend. That way you can have money to take them out. But don't overspend. No, we're not doing $200, $300 first dates over here. If they tell you that, run because it only takes $40 to clap. I know I'm horrible. I'm horrible. Moonlit cat, save me. So, what is it in this life that makes you happy? I don't. I don't believe in it. I don't think you should look for stuff to make you happy. This is why people are so. And this is the last unrelated question I'm going to take, unless unless people put it in the super chat. But um, I think people are going to be always fundamentally unhappy if they're always looking to be happy. The the pursuit the yes, I understand. The American edict is the pursuit of you know life, liberty, the pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness, and all that. But if you if you spend your life looking for happiness, you will never find it. Like that's not the you shouldn't be. Happiness is just a, a mental reward for accomplishing a goal. It's not meant to be a permanent state of affairs. So I don't look to be happy. I just look to do certain things that I want to accomplish in my life. So, but on that, let's get back to free will versus determinism. But yeah, I mean, I think that's a well, I don't want to say it's a womanly thing, but I don't think guys should be like looking to make their lives happy. Like I just don't find that fundamentally a very masculine thing. We should sort of follow Arnold Schwarzenegger and Conan the Barbarian. It's like, what is the goal of? He said, what is the purpose of life? And he says, to, to see your enemies driven before you and to hear the lamentations of their women. But no, in all seriousness, yeah, I don't. I think a life spent pursuing happiness will be a pretty mediocre life. Oh, it's Australia Day. That's what the holiday today is, Cat. I didn't know. I didn't know there was an Australia Day. but it looks like everything's died down. I think I've pretty much touched on everything I wanted to touch upon as far as the free will and determinism. It can get way more detailed. Because, like I said, guys, there's literally like hundreds of years of literature on this stuff. Like, like it goes back to the found like the beginning of modern philosophy in the 1600s with Descartes, like people talking about free will versus determinism. So there's hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of articles on it. And then, like I said, if you really want to be pedantic, like people have been talking about it since the time of Plato. So it is so many different spin-offs to how you can talk about this, but I wanted to keep it really basic because it gets really complicated really quickly. And even doing so, I had to spell out so many different terms: free uh, free will, determinism, libertarianism, compatibilism, incompatibilism, indeterminism, soft determinism, hard determinism, complete determinism, probabilistic determinism. Um, and there's one I haven't even touched upon, which is fatalism. Fatalism is fatalism is determinism's evil brother. So I haven't even touched upon this. Fatalism is saying so. Th- this is what I think is the underwriting fear for people who don't who don't want to give up the concept of free will, given that they know that free will can't be scientifically explained. I think a lot of them are scared of determinism's evil brother, which is fatalism. Fatalism is the view that things will happen no matter what you do. And um, uh, it I think this is what I think many people confuse fatalism and determinism, and that's why a lot of people reject determinism, particularly hard determinism, out of the fear that they think that hard determinism and fatalism are the same thing, and they're not. Hard determinism is just simply says that hard determinism, again, which I am, although I don't like the term, but hard determinists believe that the lawfulness of nature, um, or that nature is governed by scientific laws, includes human behavior as well. Whereas libertarians want to make an exception for human behavior or human nature. Uh, that's all that hard determinists say. Fatalists, again, are the evil brother determinism. They say, you know, whatever will happen, it doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter what you do or what you don't do. Things will always happen according to a plan, to some higher plan out there. So if you were if you were meant to become a bum on the streets, you're going to become a bum on the streets no matter what you do. You can be a you can amass you can become a billionaire. But according to fatalism, if the cosmic plan is that you're going to be a bum on the streets, you're still going to become a bum on the streets, even if you become a multi-billionaire. Obviously, fatalism has to be taken on faith, just the way the belief in free will has to be taken on faith, which is why, like I said, it has very little legs on which to stand. And I think the belief in fatalism is well, the concept of fatalism is what undergirds a lot of people's fear of determinism because they think an acceptance of determinism necessarily requires an acceptance of fatalism, and it does not whatsoever. Fatalism is just it's just a matter of is as much a matter of faith as a belief in free will is. So with that, I think I can conclude this because that was the last thing I wanted to touch upon with this topic, at least on this level, on the layman's level. If we wanted to get into it on the level of people who actually know philosophy, and are even like advanced or graduate students in it, then we could take it there. But with you guys, I'm not going to take it there to that level. I think it's it's complicated enough just at the basic level. Um, Omar says, "Yeah, I hate that song by Pharrell called "Cause I'm Happy." Yeah, I hated that song when it came out too. I only started liking it when I saw it on that movie Despicable Me, because but that's probably just because I like the movie Despicable Me. But I think that was in Despicable Me Part Two. Um, but yeah, I hated that song. Pharrell was utterly annoying with that song. That's when he started wearing that little dumbass hat. But anyway, Omar says your wife is from the Philippines. Yeah, she is. You can watch some videos of her exploring different provinces of the Philippines that you'll never see any of these travel vloggers going to. All these travel vloggers go to the same places like Siargao and Boracay and Cebu and Davao and Metro Manila and Angeles City. She goes to provinces you guys have never heard of, and you've probably never been shown that much on YouTube unless you're in tune with other Philippine vloggers. But the travel vloggers from outside the country, you probably will never see them going to these places that she's visited. And I've been able to put some of her content on my channel. So check it out if you guys want. Anyway, I'm gone. I'm leaving. This is getting late, terribly late, and um, I don't see any other questions germane to what we were talking about. Again, big shout out to Carbon for the super, um, and shout out to Blackbeard as well for the super. Appreciate you guys. I'm out unless you guys have any other questions germane to the topic, of course. I mean, you can ask me a topic. I mean, you can ask me a question off topic as long as you drop a super. But if you're not dropping a super, then it has to be on the topic. Otherwise, I'm gone because it's past 12 o'clock midnight here, past my biddy bye time, and the brother has to work. So I guess that's the conclusion. Thanks for everyone. This cool discussion. This was like this was like your this was like your like prototypical bull session. And when I say bull session, guys, that doesn't mean like talking BS. Bull session just means like when people typically like gather around and start talking about intellectual matters on an armchair level. And this typically happens like in college amongst like undergrads, they get excited about new things they start learning and talk about it late at night, usually fueled by a little bit of weed or alcohol, of which I've had neither, but I did have coffee. But yeah, um, this was a good one. So we'll do this again tomorrow, maybe a little bit earlier. Um, Agatha says okay, good night. Thanks, Agatha. So talk to all you guys later. Thank you. Have a good night and or a good day, depending on where you are.